Revenge films.
My name is Kane Murita. I had a bit of a complicated upbringing. Because both my parents passed away before I entered middle school, I was raised by my grandmother. My grandmother passed away when I went into the 6th grade, so I started living with my older brother, who was in high school at the time. My brother dropped out of high school to get a job, and because of this, he didn't have many options for work, so he always had multiple part-time jobs or was always on dispatch duties. This life continued until I graduated high school, and I got a job working as a hostess at a club while I attended college. I didn't want my brother to keep bearing all of the responsibility. I wasn't even planning on going to college in the first place, but my brother insisted.
I don't want you to suffer like me. You have a brighter future.
He pushed me to enroll, and I ended up going to a college, or I could get national qualifications. My brother was really against me working as a hostess in a club.
You can take out a student loan or try to find scholarships. I'll help you pay back the debt too.
I knew he meant well, but because my parents had also carried a lot of debt and committed suicide because of it, I hated that word more than anything. And so, despite my brother's insistence, I decided to continue working as a hostess to get myself through college. Now that I'm a mother with children of my own, I can understand why my brother was so against that job, but I don't regret it at all. After earning my national qualifications, I successfully graduated college and got a job as a nurse. My days in nightlife are far behind me, but I still stay in touch with the club manager and some of my colleagues at the time who I got along with well. About 5 years ago, I met a man who accepted me, even knowing my past, and got married to my now ex-husband. We were blessed with 2 little treasures, and for about 3 years, we lived happily in peace. That is to say, if only we hadn't become involved with his parents, my in-laws. My brother-in-law and mother-in-law were the scum of the earth. I could understand why they would hate me after knowing my past in nightlife, so I was able to tolerate them calling me parentless and a loose whore. But they also came after my brother, which I refused to accept. They would point at my brother, who had been working since he was young and had become quite ill, and called him uneducated, human trash, waste of space, and I couldn't stand it. Despite this, my husband supported me, and I was able to move on because we kept our distance from his family. His family owned a business in their hometown. My brother-in-law and mother-in-law had both graduated from prestigious universities, which they were very openly proud of. They bragged that they were able to earn so many assets on their own as the first generation in their family. But I also knew that it was a bicycle operation and that their business wasn't actually doing well. On top of that, they both spent money without a care, and I don't know what basis they had to be acting so big all the time. They would frequently call us trying to ask for money without an ounce of humbleness or respect, as if it was expected. I was able to dodge them for some time until one day, an unfortunate event resulted in having to live with them. My in-laws' family was destroyed in a house fire, and they hadn't put any fire insurance on the house, so my kind husband regretfully told them they could live with us. Ever since then, they don't work, and they don't do any chores or help around the house. My husband and I were being tossed around by these 3 money-sucking leeches in our house. In the beginning, I really did my best to try to make it work. That's why I tolerated their harassment, their bullying, and even their reckless use of our money. However, the worst part about it was seeing my husband, who had been such a great dad to our children, slowly but surely start behaving like them too. Every time I would point it out to him, he would promise me.
This time I'll protect our family.
And I would believe him, but eventually he would betray my trust over and over again. One day when I wasn't home, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law had taken my 2 daughters and put them outside in the yard half naked. As if that wasn't terrible enough, the young girls had masking tape across their mouths, and they were tied by a rope to a tree in the yard. Luckily, they told me that they hadn't been outside for long and they were okay. But the 2 of them were clearly terrified of my husband and his family. My mother-in-law said something like, discipline. But the more I pressed the story, I found out that my mother-in-law and brother-in-law were speaking so badly of me that my 2 daughters tried to stand up for me. That angered the 2 adults, and they kicked the 2 young girls outside into the cold. I couldn't believe that my husband was standing by doing nothing. If anything, it was as if he was taking their side. I was devastated by this and realized that there was no way that we could rebuild our relationship anymore. I didn't want to get a divorce. I wanted him to regret the way that he had treated my daughters and the pain that he had caused all three of us. From there, I began preparing my plan. I explained the situation to my brother and his wife and had them look after my daughters while I went back to my in-laws and continued to give them the money as if nothing had happened. At the same time, I canceled my bank account and I moved all of my savings into a separate account and followed up accordingly. This way, after the divorce, it wouldn't affect the division of property and I wouldn't lose any of it. Our house was newly built, but it was under my husband's name, so I skillfully coaxed him into mortgaging the house so that he could borrow money for his mom's leisurely expenses. My husband didn't have a clue, so he went to loan as much money as he could. My mother-in-law and brother-in-law weren't working, and I knew that my husband's company was already going down the drain. So all I had to do was wait until it was bankrupt. During that time, I went and found a lawyer who was known to be strong in divorces, and in order to be able to have the upper hand, I also hired a detective agency. Eventually, as expected, my husband's company went bankrupt. My husband and his entire family had become dependent on my income and had no other way of survival. At that time, I invited my father-in-law and brother-in-law out on a night on the town. I knew that they both liked playing with women, and yet were also the type to look down on hostesses and women. They also loved to show off, so I knew that they were easy bait for women in that industry. I reached out to my old club manager and my old colleagues and explained the situation to them, and I asked them to dote on the two losers and rack up their bill as much as possible. I didn't say anything about paying for them. All I did was introduce them to the women. Knowing their personality, I already could predict that they would try to get me to pay. 3 months later, I let them drink to their heart's content with the girls. Of course, I didn't put down a penny for them. When they realized that I wasn't going to pay, they started inviting my husband to go drink with them. And that was because they knew that my husband had mortgaged the house and taken out a loan, and therefore he had money. By this point, my husband had been completely brainwashed by his family, and I later heard from my colleague at the club that he was saying,
My wife is the same as you all. A trashy girl who came from the slums that is worth nothing. Thanks to that trashy girl, I guess I have 2 kids, but turns out the kids are just as much a trash as her.
and was trashing not only my colleagues, but his own wife and daughters. I wanted to go after him right then and there and serve him the divorce papers. But my former colleagues were amazing. You don't need to worry about us. We're perfectly fine to listen to his stupid rant. Men like that are easier to trap anyway. They kindly calmed me down, and I knew that I just had to be a little more patient for the plan to come to fruition, so I held on. They were showing off to the hostesses, and of course, it wasn't long before their savings ran out. My in-laws had been hiding this, but I knew before they even moved in that they had already gone bankrupt. In the end, as a result of mortgaging the house and losing all of the money they had borrowed, they fell into a hell of a debt on their own, with nothing they could do about it. That was when I had the lawyer, who had been waiting for the right moment by my side as I served the divorce papers. They were of course counting on my savings, but I had already canceled all my accounts and put it all into a safe as cash. No matter how much they tried to find it, they wouldn't be able to find anything. They don't have the funds to launch any kind of investigation anyway. The house was under my ex-husband's name, but because it was built from the savings account that I had from before we got married, I hadn't taken any loans out for it. When I remembered how much money I had spent on building the house for us, I did feel a little regret, but that didn't matter when I thought about my daughters. After all of this, my husband was crying and begging on his knees to me, but it didn't affect me at all. You took your own pain and frustrations out on my children. I most certainly do not need a husband like that, and I also do not need any of you either. I can and will raise my children on my own income. I declared this to them and put them in the past. Although the divorce was mostly my husband's responsibility, I decided not to collect a settlement fee nor child support, and instead asked to cut off all communication with them. I made them swear not to get involved with me or my daughters anymore, by making them sign a contract. Should they ever even try, they'll quickly be fined. They had also looked down on me so much as a former nightclub hostess, so I wanted to get revenge on them for that and give them a taste of how smart and strong us women were. As for my children, I was worried that they were traumatized by that experience, but while they were staying with my brother's family, It seemed like they had a really good time. By the time I had finished my revenge plan and gone to pick them up, they'd completely returned to their old happy selves, and I was relieved. My ex-husband and his family were forced to become homeless after that. No matter what they tried to do, their debt was probably more than they could ever pay back within their lifetime. And they were so desperate that they ended up having to get involved with the loan shark. This got back to my ex-husband's family, and he was fired. And apparently the four of them are left desperately running away from the collectors. Despite their attempts to get away, of course, nobody was going to rent a house to people that were carrying so much debt. And so they had no other choice but to remain homeless. Some of you might think, how sad, and maybe I took it too far. But I have no intention of sympathizing with the scum of the earth who would put 3- and 4-year-old little girls through that kind of hell. I hope that they spend the rest of their lives regretting treating my daughters like that.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.